So we are in the process of starting a new organization called Accelerate India Philanthropy. The purpose is to get ultra high net worth individuals to give more, give sooner, and give better. This is really a platform by philanthropists for philanthropists. And our own belief is that a lot of wealth has been crystallized in India in the last couple of decades. More will be crystallized in the next decade. A number of leaders like Mr. Premji, Nandan and Rohini Nilekani, many others have stepped forward and done amazing work over the course of the last decade or two. Now there's been even more in terms of a next generation of givers, many from the startup ecosystem, who are also starting at a very young age. And then there's some next generation philanthropists, people within families where the younger generation are getting involved. AIP will play a role in building this ecosystem, getting more people into the fold of philanthropy, and then working in a concerted manner with those who express interest in taking their philanthropy forward. So this is the first of a series of conversations with philanthropists targeted at other philanthropists. And I'm so delighted that my first guest is Swathi Kantamani. She is someone I've known for a few years, deeply respect the work that she's been doing. And we have a shared passion for education and early childhood, foundational literacy and numeracy. We've had several conversations about that. So Swathi, I'd like to start the conversation by asking you to talk a little bit about yourself and your journey, why you are where you are, a little bit about yourself and how you've stumbled upon, what you're doing today.
Hi Ashish, thank you for that very high praise. I'm not sure I'm deserving of it, but at least I have something now to aspire to and work towards. I'm basically came into this, I think, because I've studied English literature for a large part of my educational career has been in English literature, and I studied African American women's writing. So that was an area of interest. It was a passion, and I think I always assumed I'd end up in academia. I thought I would teach or I would write, and that's where I thought I'd end up. But what we don't realize is that even a lot of African American writing speaks a lot about, deprivation. It talks about poverty, talks about just lack of access to things that are humanly people should have access to. And I think that played possibly a large role in the way I started thinking about life and going forward and things like that. So when I went to Oxford to study, and I studied African American women's writing there as well, I had a lot of people asking me, what is the point of this? And so what if you end up in academia? And so what is the point? And so why? And, where is this going? And so, that kind of became internally the way I question myself as well. A lot of why, a lot of how, a lot of so what, and a lot of where does this lead me? And, why is that important? And so I think that's when, I started working in a publishing company because I was married at the time. And so I would spend the weekends with Natco Trust. I would go to the field. I would observe things that are going on. And remember, I was very young, so nobody looked at me. I don't even think they realized I was there. So it was fantastic, really. It was voyeurism of a sort because nobody realized I was there. And I could look into every aspect of what was going on. I could look at people. I could understand, what they were saying. I could understand where they were coming from. And I think that gave me a really, really good and quick insight into what philanthropy probably consisted of at that time. So I think that's perhaps my starting, Ashish. That's where I began. And I think a couple years into being in publishing, they wanted me to come into Natco and, start working in the CSR domain. And because of my weekend stints, I was already quite interested. And I thought, okay, maybe I haven't studied this, but perhaps we could look at this. This is a possibility.
And did the Natco Trust already exist?
The Natco Trust has existed since 1993. So when I came in, and I would go in with the village, the staff into villages and things like that, I think the things that I noticed were, and the things that really got me hooked were, I think, issues of scope, in terms of the number of people you can really benefit
Right.
um, from doing this kind of work. The second thing is, I think, scale. That if you're doing this well, how else? What else? And those questions keep coming back to me. So what? And then what now? And what's the way forward?
Right.
And the third thing which struck me, and I'm not sure there was much of it at that time because I think philanthropy was not being thought of on these lines, but it struck me that, structure and processes struck me as being very, very important. So yes, Natco was already in philanthropy at that time. Yes.
And is there an area of work that was particularly appealing to you?
So I think, initially, Ashish, because I was handling an organization that was already being run and it was led by, other people. Some of the first issues that we came across were issues of really giving very sporadically. It was very knee jerk. If somebody came to us with a need, we would give it to them. So it was kind of fissured and sporadic spending. Um, and so we would spend on things that came to us. And somewhere along, I think I decided that we need to focus more on specific areas. We can't be doing this because we're exhausting our money and we have no impact to show, really. Also, domain knowledge and excellence, you can't achieve when you're doing so many things. And so we decided to work on health and education. So about 95% of what we spend in a given year, we spend on health and education. And it alternates because depending on where capital expenses tend to be more, it kind of falls on either or. But it's health and education largely.
And initially, was it a purely grant-making approach, and has it shifted since?
Yes. So I think it was largely grant making. And we moved it slightly because we worked largely in the areas where we were, right? So it was where our factories were, where our people were, and where we could benefit the people around us. Not just if they worked for us, but also if they were in our presence. That we thought that we should be able to make a change. So we moved it to more of a project-based. How are we giving the money that we give and ensuring that it's reaching the last mile? So I think, a shift happened in that sense.
Yeah. And as you, picked education and healthcare, what specifically did you decide would your strategy be? What would you do in these two areas?
So initially, Ashish, I think I came into it like a lot of people come into it. You want to save the world. And so when you said, we said we'll do education, we went in and said, oh, why are government schools like this? Why can't they be like this? And why can't they be like that? And as you get deeper and deeper into the processes that actually operate and, the lacuna there are loopholes, they're not really anybody's fault. There are systemic, it's a juggernaut. I mean, we're a massive country with massive issues. And then you realize that, working with the government really probably becomes the most crucial thing. And so a lot of the early learning has been that we can't do things ourselves. We have to start, but we wanted to change everything. So we said we wanted to change government schools. We wanted to probably work in undergrad level. We wanted to do postgrad level. And we said education means the whole sweep. I think we wisened up luckily quite soon and said that can't be the way it is. And so we looked at village-wise what were issues that were coming up. And largely the issues that came up had to do with people and government interface. So it was with Anganwadis, it was with government primary schools, it was with government secondary schools. Then when you get into schools, what you don't realize is you have to touch, whether you like it or not, nutrition and health. So it's school health, it's school nutrition. We've done a lot of tie-ups with, say, eye hospitals, heart disease, because these are things that children have. It's a reality in schools. And so, I think that's how we came in, saying we want to do everything. But I think once you get more deeply entrenched in the system, you realize where the requirements are and how much your funds will allow you to do. And so you kind of, zero in on where it can be. With healthcare, again, it was government. It was always with the government. We never said we will spend every pie of ours on our own. But even with the government, we started off saying, how about we work in the area of cancer, because Natco makes a lot of cancer drugs. Natco's philosophy has been that we make expensive cancer medication available at cheap rates to large populations. So it's really been the question of access. And so we really use that same philosophy in getting into cancer hospitals, into government hospitals, and so on.
And do you fund physical infrastructure, or do you stay more
We've had to, I think we've had to, Ashish. A lot of the areas that we work in are rural and remote. And as a start, at least to begin with, if you're not able to put in that kind of money, I think it's difficult to build trust, both with the stakeholders and with the government. And so initially, yes, we did. We put in a lot of capital cost in improving, in even building Anganwadis and schools, and also in hospitals.
Yeah. And did you pull in partners, i.e. NGOs, for some of the implementation?
Initially, we did definitely. I think initially the kind of NGOs that we pulled in were, and because they were small and they were sort of grassroots NGOs, we pulled them in to handle issues that came up for us that we thought we didn't have expertise in. For example, if it was a science and technology based NGO, Telugu medium, and we needed them to come into the government to plug certain science related issues, we would have them come, or math, or literacy, or sports, or even nutrition. So we'd get them in, one for technical know-how, for knowledge sharing, but we'd also get them in to tell us how to do what we need to do better, and perhaps they could do some of the things that we undertook.
So the relationship with the government was with you, and you were already there, and then you had some kind of program design of interventions, and then you pulled in people who had expertise.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
And how do you think about sort of evaluation or holding folks accountable to results in this space?
Are you referring to holding NGOs accountable?
Or? Yeah. How do you work with them? I mean, I'm sure do you treat them as partners? Do you treat them as vendors? Is it everything is project based? How do you know that they've delivered? I
think NGOs, NPOs, especially of small scale and grassroots level, I think have very clear and in-depth solutions for the issues at hand. I think I'd like to say that first. And whether it's from speaking the local language, to the quality of their interactions with beneficiaries, it's very authentic and it's transformative.
Yeah.
I think where I saw an issue with NGOs that we worked with is that they're very plugged into certain systemic realities, and they've been negotiating these on a daily basis, right? So that becomes quite difficult for them sometimes. The other issue, I think, is the kind of funding structure that they have. And so very often they kind of get pulled away from doing what they really have to do to doing what they've been prescribed to do in order to survive. I mean, it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but it's just something I've noticed. And also their ability to hold on to quality staff, I think, quality people. These are some of the challenges that we've realized. As for assessing them, I think, there are a number of M&E metrics that you could use, and we've used a lot of them. But if you really are in the field and you know what you're looking for, it's visible, Ashish. Like, I could go to an Anganwadi and say, this is where an NGO is supposed to make this impact. I can see it. Yeah. You ask the children a certain number of questions, you ask the teachers, you have a, kind of walk around and look at what the ambience is like, you look at where the intervention has happened. It becomes quite obvious.
And do you typically use a third party to do some kind of assessment, or do you use a more practical internal monitoring approach, or a combination of both?
I would say a combination of both. Our first go-to is internal because we know what we want. And I think off the bat, we'll know whether something is working or not. But a more long-term thing, and we're doing this annually now, is we have very clear M&E metrics that we want measured. And we, for ourselves, have decided that this M&E is something that has to be the fulcrum of our review process. So we're constantly saying we review not only the M&E data, but we also review the the metrics that the M&E is measuring. Because that changes in a landscape from time to time, and that this becomes both your short-term and long-term review process. So I think that's the way.
How many KPIs would you have? How many metrics? would you track, say in a
Um,
Anganwadi program?
we have many, Ashish. We have both a combination of, I think, the qualitative part and the quantitative part.
Right.
The quantitative part is often much easier to assess. And so every Anganwadi of ours, for example, has a list of what an Anganwadi is supposed to be.
Right.
We have it in English, we have it in Telugu. And we are constantly, so it's not a metric that's hidden or only for us. It's a metric that's out there for the people. It covers big things like numeracy and literacy. But it also covers things like hygiene. It covers things like the timing that the Anganwadi teacher is present and the Aya is present. It covers, the regularity of meal distribution. It covers hygiene, cooking, quality of food being served. How long are the children in the Anganwadi? Are they there from 9 to 4, which is the prescribed time? And so we have many of those, yes.
And do you have one sort of North Star metric for health education? Is there like one metric you would say, if we can achieve this, that we've really achieved success?
I think one of them is definitely, I think, the amount of money perhaps that we're saving for a parent or a patient who's coming into this into this either school or hospital or whatever it is. And I'll give you an example. We have the Guntur Government Hospital in Guntur, which is in Andhra Pradesh. We have built a cancer hospital in the Guntur Government Hospital for them. This is the first government cancer center in Andhra Pradesh. And it was obviously very necessary because a lot of people would travel to Telangana and Hyderabad to get treatment. Now, how do I measure something like this, right? So one is, it is just the number of people being benefited from whatever is available. The second thing is also that each person that comes in, each patient is probably spending 2 to 3 lakhs minimum on cancer care. And so I think that's a metric. So how much am I saving per patient who's coming in? I'm giving it to them for free.
Right.
I think so that is probably my North Star metric in terms of how much I'm saving for
Right.
a person who comes in to seek a government service that I am helping and that I'm, bolstering, as opposed to going to a private entity and seeking the same service.
Yeah, because this would be a huge burden for the family.
Absolutely.
Undergoing this, and
it often wipes them out.
Quality metric as well that you have in terms of ensuring that there's.
So there's two things, and I can give you both examples. So we are in Guntur Government Hospital with the cancer block, and we're looking at how many. So on a given day, there are 200 people who walk into that hospital, right? Whether it's IP or OP, there's 200 people in there. I mean, that's directly for me a benefit. But we also work with palliative care centers. Now, how do I measure impact in a palliative care center? It's very different. And often these metrics are developed as you keep visiting, as you keep speaking to people and things like that. So I would say that's a more qualitative kind of thing. You're looking at ambience, you're looking at patient care, you're looking at the nature of the counseling, you're looking at life end, how, what dignity you're giving them. There's a lot of other things that go in. What are the medicines that are being given to them? How much morphine? So it's just a completely different. And I think each project requires you to think really about what sort of metric you need to put in place for it.
Yeah. And what have been your biggest challenges?
I think early on, Ashish, I think the challenge of trying to do too much. One has definitely been trying to do too much. So you're really diluting the money that you have in the breadth of work that you're trying to do. The current challenges I have are perhaps those of people quality. I think because of some degree of bad press that's happened for CSR and NGOs and things like that, we're not able to attract, I think, the kind of quality that we'd like to attract, both because we work with, at any given time, 250 people who are in our team and working. We need really great teachers for the work that we're doing. We need really great people to be at the field doing what they do. We also need really great people to partner with us, and those become, I think, so people quality is definitely a big issue. The second challenge we have, and I think this is largely self-imposed, is one of not advocating ourselves enough. And so thinking that what you do, this is very sort of, the traditional way of doing it, where we give money and we don't really talk about it, or we don't, we do it quietly. There is, of course, merit in that. But when you get out there and talk about the issues and make sure that you're heard, I think more ideas come into being, and you're able to really leverage whatever is there in the ecosystem. So I would say those two.
Where would you like to see your work in 5 years, Swathi?
I'd like to see us, I think, really effecting policy change, I think, Ashish, because what we've done really well. But it's been small, and I won't even pretend that this is enough, or that this will even remotely compare to what the government is capable of doing. And I'd like us to be there. I think I'd like to be heard more by the government, just because we bring some degree of expertise to the work we do. And we'd really love for them to be able to take this up, and we're there in every way to support them.
That's interesting, because I often hear from people that at some point, scaling your own program, there's a limit to it, of course, in terms of resources. And so maybe once you have a template, a model of excellence, that maybe a better way is to go and, based on the learnings, go and advocate for change, either in your state or nationwide or what have you.
Absolutely.
So I guess that's the philosophy that you have, that now you've really got a good model, and now you want it to spread more than scale, in a way.
Absolutely. And that's both in education and health. For example, the government hospital that we built as well. I think it's a great thing for us to take to different places, because it's purely PPP. We build the hospital, we do the maintenance, we do the hygiene, but the government gives high-end machines that, no government hospital has had, till now. And we're just showing you how successful something like this can be. So why not replicate? And we can't do it alone. I mean, let me not even.
And so typically when you work with government, do you have a MOU for a certain number of years? Is there clear understanding in terms of what you're going to be doing? And how much because government is putting in most of the money, where do you feel philanthropists need to apply their resources? Is it more technical expertise? Where's the highest payoff, in a sense, when you partner with the government?
The government, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think the highest payoff is wherever your passion lies. I mean, I think if you feel like giving the technical expertise is where you want it, that's definitely where your highest payoff is going to be. And you can always, I think the government, especially in Telangana, but also in a lot of other states where I've spoken to them, they're open to whatever it is that you want to bring in, I think, and they're willing to cover the other corners. So that's an important aspect to think about. Now, when you get in, I think it's important to have clarity on what you want to do and where you bring your sort of mind and expertise. And you can work around it. We've done both. We've done both in different settings.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I mean, Swathi, you've obviously had a real passion from a young age, and you've now been doing this many years. What have you, to learn as a philanthropist, what do you do, whether it's reading, interaction with peers? What are your modes of sort of learning so that you feel you can continue to improve your work and also get energized?
Yeah. I think a combination of things, Ashish. First and foremost, and I think single most important thing, is getting up and visiting the field sites.
Yeah.
Nothing really energizes me or gives me the kind of insight that I need into a project unless I do that. The second thing is definitely reading, because I realize that I have a lot of the grassroots knowledge, but a lot of importance is also given to how you articulate that. And if you're not in the know-how of what people are saying about it and how it's being said and stuff like that, then you're kind of, you're sort of just lagging behind. The third thing is, I think, to be shamelessly curious. This as well. I just pick up the phone and ask people questions. I ask people for help. I ask people incredibly stupid questions, but I ask it. So I think a
No,
combination.
you're amazing, I think, in terms of just reaching out and wanting to connect and build an ecosystem, really, as
Yeah, I
opposed
think also the
to.
latest thing I've started doing is looking for direction. I mean, there's only so much that I can do as an individual, and there's so many people doing so much more than I've done.
Yeah.
So instead of saying I'm going to figure this whole journey out myself, I'm saying why should I do that? Let me just sort of cut to and then go to them and get some inputs on how to work and go forward.
And what has been your observation, Swathi, around the state of philanthropy in India, and where's the promise? What does the future look like?
For the longest time, I think I was, wary of the skepticism around philanthropy. I think, Ashish, just because of bad press and things like that. But today, and especially after COVID, I imagine that there's a force. There's this new corporate force that wants to come in, wants to know, wants to be there. Now, whatever that reason may be, and if you look at it in two ways, who are HNIs really? So put the money aside for a minute. But
Right.
these are people who've seen opportunity, who've seen a problem, who've seen a social gap, and said, "Let me fill it." And they've done this with great success because they're intelligent people who know how to scale, who clearly know how to make money, who really have been able to address and seal those gaps or plug those market loopholes. Um, Essentially, these people, it also means, can bring the same mind and intellect to a social problem if they were presented with it. And I think that is a really exciting and amazing place that we're at today. Um, Perhaps it is more of our responsibility to bring them in, to ask them the questions, to really kindle an interest. But they're there. And I think we've never had this landscape before. It's a very, very positive and exciting place to be, I think, in terms of Indian philanthropy.
Yeah. And you've obviously, the Natco Trust, as you said, has been around since 1993. So it's been 30 years now doing good work. And clearly, CSR is, I think, a force for good, particularly since the 2% has come in, the numbers have grown. You've obviously been doing it longer, but most companies got started only in the last decade, and the numbers have grown considerably, and people have figured out the areas they want to work in. How do you think of your personal philanthropy or your family's personal philanthropy beyond CSR?
Well, we've always thought of it as beyond CSR. We're actually initially were very annoyed with this term of CSR because it felt limiting. It felt like one of those things that you had to do. But we don't look at the problem anymore. I think a lot of the money that we put in is family money. It's not just Natco money, because we wouldn't be able to cover the projects that we want to cover if there's something we want to do. Capital expenses, for example, a lot of it is family money that we give in. And so if we were to look at a cause and say this really is something that needs our help, it needs us to be there, but it also ties in with what Natco Trust believes in and does. We've done it. So it's always been a personal philosophy for us, Ashish. It's never really been about CSR.
Yeah. And as you talk to people who have an interest in philanthropy, but aren't as far down the journey as you are, what do you think are the barriers to people, who say, I'd like to give, but for some reason I haven't started?
I think the first one is probably skepticism. And the second one is probably lack of domain knowledge.
Right.
I don't think it's any kind of misintention or lack of intention or any of that. People want to be prodded a little bit, I think, into saying, don't be afraid of these two things. They're not big. This is how to overcome them. I think those two would probably be the largest obstacles.
And so, just to take what you said, I mean, people are skeptical of the fact that they think either NGOs are dhila dhala, they don't get things done,
What does
or,
that mean, by the way?
well, the Hindi term is, where they're kind of loosey-goosey, they don't get things done.
Okay.
Or that, maybe it's the sector, your money is not spent appropriately, or Sometimes even people are concerned that there may be fraud or lack of governance. What has been your experience? Because my experience has been that, yeah, there are some people issues in the NGO sector, but I don't think it's a murky sector.
I
Do you
don't think
agree?
so either, Ashish. And especially if you were to do just a tiny bit of due diligence. I mean, if a corporate were to buy a smaller company, for example, what would you
Yeah.
do in order to buy that small company? Suppose it's only a 2 crore or a 5 crore company, and I'm talking about large corporates. What would you do? You would study, right? If you don't do it yourself, you'd have a team to study it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's perhaps the same approach that we need to take. Due diligence, assessment.
And it's
If not
very basic
anything
due
else,
diligence, right?
absolutely. And really, all you need, it's not a different
Yeah.
part of the brain. It's essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
Assess them. But if you're really passionate about it and you want to see what they're doing, go and visit. Have a team member of yours visit. Ask them the questions that concern you.
Yeah.
I think that's really it.
Yeah. And as you think about approaches to philanthropy, I mean, different people have different approaches. What have you seen? I mean, I'm sure you've spoken with many people. What are the 2, 3 archetypes of philanthropy that you have seen that people may want to consider?
Um, well, I think the ones that I've noticed are ones where it's direct grant, right?
Yeah.
Which is a great way to do it. If you were to do a little bit of due diligence for, whoever you're giving it to, and of course, trust is a huge part of just giving grants. The second one is where you do your own projects, which is very, very satisfying. It is very rewarding, but it's a huge amount of work. I mean, I, as a family member, do nothing else, right? This is all I do. And so because I'm also a family member, there's a degree of seriousness that's given to CSR in our company. But it might be very difficult to achieve at first. The third one is to do it, as a group. So you amongst other people, you all fund something or you run projects together and you get partners to do what you do. All three are interesting. It just depends, I think, on how involved you want to be, how much you want to give, and what model you're most comfortable with, I think.
In the grant making model, obviously due diligence is critical. But beyond that, did you find, I mean, you mentioned you were doing more grant making earlier. Is there some value add that people can provide even without a large team?
In
What's
grant
the
making?
highest value add? If there's a new philanthropist who just says, I'll shortlist organizations and make 5 or 10 grants to get started, right? Apart from the money, where can they add the most value to the organization?
In every way that you've added value to your business,
Right.
I think if you were to bring that same mindset of sorting the problem, bringing your analysis, bringing your passion, bringing your metrics, it's essentially the same thing,
So
Ashish.
saying it's not that different.
I
Don't
don't think it's
stop your
different. I
brain
think
and go there. Don't go just all. Obviously, you need heart, but also look at it analytically. Ask the right questions.
there's a lot of this heart talk that happens around giving and the social sector. It's great, and that's probably what brings you in there in the first place.
Yeah.
And it's funny because as and when you see things happening, your heart gets satisfied. So I
Yeah.
think it's important also for us to put that aside for a minute and say, okay, the heart is taken care of. Now, can my head function to see? Because I think that
I like the way you
balance is
put
very
it.
important.
Yeah, no, I like the way you put it. The heart brings you in, and then you need to use your head maybe more, and maybe the heart kicks in again when you see the results, when you go on the ground.
Absolutely. And the heart is what brings you to a meeting. The heart is what
It
makes
keeps
you
you
say
going
what
on.
you say. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so really for corporates and companies to come in, the same level of intelligence, critical thinking, lateral thinking, all of that you bring into your work, the social sector needs.
Yeah. And has this been, like you would say, your philanthropy been like the most fulfilling thing in your life? I mean, from a
No,
work.
Ashish, it used to be the most fulfilling thing till I had my children.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
my
said from a
children,
work standpoint, aside from family and other personal things.
Oh, well, that is my work. I do nothing else.
Yeah.
So,
So
yes,
you've not been involved with Natco as a company at
in
all?
small ways, yes, but the largest is to do the social work. And yes, it's been hugely satisfying. The fact that I'm still here, the fact that I have two amazing kids, but I still want to be here and I still want to do this more than anything else. And I want to do it bigger and better.
Yeah. Are there some areas, I mean, you work obviously in education and health, which are two areas that tend to attract the most money, but also the most interest. As you've gotten to know the sector better, are there some neglected areas you'd encourage people to look at who may be more agnostic or maybe doing more of their own homework to see where they like to give?
I would say yes, there are. First and foremost, and this comes in first, I think, just because of the degree of help it needs, is I think in people development, Ashish, especially in education. I think we need more and better people coming into teacher training, for example. I think we need more and better people coming in to inspire and motivate and reward even government teachers, of course, who are salaried. They don't need a salary from you. What they need from you perhaps is a pat on the back, perhaps is a congratulations. So if there were people who could come in to do that, to help them just be better at what they do, but also just to inspire them to do what they have to do every day. This is not easy work. So I think that's a big gap. And there are a lot of, in the government machinery, for example, there's a lot of delivery loopholes. And if a corporate or an NGO could say, I'm not going to do a new project. My whole and soul sort of vision is to just make sure that this delivery mechanism is sorted. I think there is a lot of scope there.
Yeah. And how is the family involved with your philanthropy, your work? I mean, whether it's your husband, kids, other family members, are they, I mean, obviously, I know Rajiv is busy with the business, but does he
Yeah.
get engaged? Do you pull him in?
Well, he's on a lighter note. I mean, their largest contribution is staying out of it, I think. But no, I mean, we talk a lot about the work that we're doing. It's hugely satisfying for us. So we talk a lot about it. My father-in-law is very involved. It gives him great joy. And remember that this is legacy, right? A lot of the work we do. And so nobody says Natco is doing the work. They say Nannapaneri Chaudhry Garu is doing the work. And I think that's important. It's very, very important. As for my children and so on, they're very young, Ashish. I don't want to push them to think in any way, but they're aware of the work that we do. And for now, that's it.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, legacy is a very important part in people's philanthropy because they feel like, obviously, the company you build is a big part of your legacy and then your contribution to society. But is there a broader motivating factor for philanthropists, which is that India is at a certain stage of development and all of us have also benefited from India's growth? That there's this idea to give back towards, building the nation, building a better India. Do you feel that inspires you at the core?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm deeply nationalistic. It's not. It's not a bent of mind. It's just deeply in my core. It's what I want to do. And it's not about any political party. It's really just about my country. And as for legacy in terms of giving for the country, I think it's funny, Ashish. I believe that this is something that should motivate everyone, even in business. It's just an angle that nobody has spoken about as much as they are speaking about it today. So even when you start a company, you run a company successfully and you say, I contribute this percent of India's GDP, or this is the number of jobs I create. I think they should have always, from day one, been a parallel discussion of how this is really building your country up and what you're doing on the side. Sadly, that has not happened until now. But I mean, so what? We've woken up and we're doing it now. And I think we're really going to see traction. Because the more that younger people are going to think about it, the more it's going to be in their DNA, right? So it's not like you reach 60 and then you decide about your legacy. It's children who are deciding they already want a legacy. And I think that's very powerful.
Yeah. And Andrew Carnegie said this, he had this famous line in his book, The Gospel of Wealth, that he who dies rich dies disgraced. Now, I know we all in India, of course, want to leave our kids with, whether it's wealth, company, what have you. How do you guys think about this? I mean, whether it's, what do you leave for your children? What do you leave for society? I mean, is there a formula in your mind? Have you thought about this? Does it influence how much you'll eventually give towards philanthropy?
There is a rough formula right now, but we are still working on how we want to get there. As for our children, I think we wish for them everything that we wish for the children of the Anganwadis and the schools that we work for, Ashish, which is basically irrespective of what you have or don't have, you have to seek out this, this, and this. And I would say, for example, you have to do a 9 to 5 job, right? You have to, it's a minimum. You have to, pass out of college. That's not a negotiable. You have to do a 9 to 5 job, whether you choose to cook or you want to be a watchman or, whatever it is that you want to do, you do it from 9 to 5. And I think that's essentially what we're saying, even to the children that we work with, is that you have to find that life purpose and you have to go forward. If you don't do this, even if I were to leave you a legacy of however many millions of dollars, it's going to come to naught because you don't know how to handle it and you don't know the significance that that holds. As for family and our idea of how much we want to give, I think we're going to, for now, we've decided that there's a certain percentage and we do that. But I think it's going to also depend on going forward, what we see, what interests us, and how much that's going to take from us.
Yeah.
And so we're not shy to leave a little less for the children and give a little more to the company. I think what we're building with children is skill sets and an attitude to life. I don't think that that little bit of money this way, that way should.
And do you see yourself, Rajiv, and you getting more bolder with your philanthropy, maybe giving even more?
We already are. I think we already are.
We've already made the step.
We've already, earlier we said we have to be in it. Now we're saying it doesn't matter if we're not in it. We can trust them. We know that they'll do a good job and we give you money to do this. We have, for the first time, I think, given to projects that we've never given in 30 years. And in terms of our line of thinking, which was education in schools and primary schools and Anganwadis, we've now given to higher education organizations. And so I think we're already getting bolder, but I imagine we will. I have time. I find myself to be probably one of the younger people in the room at any given time. So I think I have that added advantage, and I think we are getting bolder, and we'll probably be emboldened.
And I think you're right, Swathi. I think the one moment you're passionate about something, the moment you get into the domain, the moment your heart gets pulled in, as you said, you go to the field. And I think maybe it just accelerates thereafter, like it's happened for you.
Absolutely. There's no way, there's no turning around, Ashish. And it's not because strategically there's no turning around, but your heart won't let you go back.
Yeah, it's beautifully put. Thank you, Swathi, for that frank and open and lovely conversation. I think I came away with a number of messages. I think one is, it's just amazing, your spirit, your early experiences in life that shaped you to become who you are. The fact that at a very young age, you got involved with philanthropy through the Natco Trust, your personal family philanthropy, how you sort of moved from a grant-making model to more, you run your own programs, got deeper into the domains, healthcare and education, while doing a variety of things in those areas. I like the fact that you've really pulled in lots of partners. I mean, you have some ideas about what you want to do in terms of Anganwadi improvement or hospitals, healthcare, but you do work with partners and pull them in. You value their expertise. You recognize the constraints they have and you try to make up for that, but you do value what they bring to the table.
Absolutely.
The strengths that they have. You are about measurement and tracking, and you have lots of indicators in terms of KPIs, a multi-dimensional sort of approach to doing it. And the fact that you're always learning. I mean, seems like you reach out very proactively, you're learning you're making the switch, I think, from also to do this policy advocacy work because you've got a model of excellence now. And I think you, as you said, you've become much bolder with your philanthropy as you've gotten pulled into it. And finally, I think this message that, for everybody, running their company, of course, and creating wealth is you're creating jobs, you're building the nation. But there's a second part that everybody needs to do, which is nation building, which is to look at the rest of society, the less privileged, in whichever manner, whichever area that interests you. But this idea of nation building that I think should bring all philanthropists together, because we are together building a better India. And I think
Absolutely.
you're very much a key part of that. So thank you for the wonderful work that you do, and thank you for being so open and for
Thank
sharing.
you, Ashish. It's such a privilege to be here. It's an honor. Even with my limited experience, that you wanted to chat and get an idea of what we do. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Swathi.